I have completed my weaving. I did half of my board all the way around, and then I did the other half just on one side to create my flap. So I am ready to take my pouch off of my cardboard loom. So my suggestion is the first thing that I would do is to take this tail, because that was where I ended up. This is my last string that I just took off my needle. The first thing I suggest doing is tying that string in a knot around my very last warp yarn. So I am just figuring out how to make that a tight knot, and I'm actually going to double knot it just to be on the safe side. Technically, if I wove my pouch tight enough, this is not a completely necessary step. But I like to do that just to be on the safe side, because I spent a long time and I took really good care to do my weaving pouch. So I have secured my final string. I am now going to trim it, but I never trim all the way to the very end, because then sometimes it slips out of the knot. All right, and then I have another little tail here at the other end. If you are able to tie that in a knot around whatever you can tie, go ahead. I'm actually tying that to the first woven string, so I'm tying it to itself. And I just did a single knot because, like I said, that's not completely necessary. I'm just trimming it, leaving myself just a little bit of a tail. All right, the next thing. This is kind of the fun part, but it's also sort of the scary part. So I wove almost all the way up here to the little notches in my board. But when I flip it over on the other side, I have some warp strings still visible. And I also have this one piece that is taped down. So at this point, you can untape that string. Take your tape off, throw that away. All right. It gets a little tricky here if you have very short warp strings or warp threads, like mine. If your board is bigger than mine, you will likely have these strings a little longer. So that will make it a little bit easier, but either way, it's totally doable. So what we are going to do is I am going to take my scissors and I am going to trim so that I have warp string on this side, and then I also have warp string coming through here and going around, and I'm going to pull it out of the notches. So that might not make sense, but it will make sense when I do it. So I am going to go ahead and snip those two warp strings, and you can see I still have some here and I have some here. And then I do just 2 or 3 at a time. I'm going to go ahead and tie those together. I'm going to double knot it. So tied it once, tied it twice, just like I might double knot my shoes. And then that string is finished. And then I'm going to snip it on the next 2 strings. I am going to tie these together like this. And double knot it, and then I'm done with those 2 strings. And then I'm going to continue all the way across my board on this side, and those other strings are still where they are. They're being secured by those little notches that I made in my cardboard loom. So I have double knotted that one. I'm going to keep going and double knotting all of these strings. If you happen to end up with an odd number of strings, now if you can see, I have 2 strings and 2 strings that I can tie together, but I will, and so I will have an even number of strings. But if you have an odd number of strings, you can always tie 1 and 2 together. Like you can do a 3 string knots. All right, I'm on my last one. I'm double knotting it, and I am done with this side of my pouch. I'm going to let those little tails there. I know they're a little bit ugly, but I'm going to take care of those in a minute. So the next step is I'm going to actually flip my board over. I am going to start pulling my strings through the notches. I have my little tails, and I'm going to do the same thing again on this side. And this is where you don't want to have it cut too short on the other side. So you kind of have to eye it and make sure that you have enough warp thread to tie your knots on both sides. So before you cut it, make sure you have your strings long enough on both sides. All right, so I am gonna continue this all the way down my board, or all the way across my board, I should say. And it does get a little bit tricky when the strings are bent and they want to go one way and you need them to go another way. So take your time and make good knots. So I like to keep them in the notches until I am ready to use them. That way they don't start to let my weaving fall out, because if you pull them all off too early and they're not tied in the knots, your weaving will just go straight through those strings. You'll know what I mean if you do it, and then you just have to be very careful and make sure that you keep those strings woven. All right, I am almost there at the end of my board. And their strings are a little bit short, so they are a little bit tricky to tie. And I am going to end up with an odd number here, so you can see what I mean by like an odd number of strings, of warp strings. Remember, the warp strings are on my project, the white strings, but they're the ones that are in my cardboard. All right, so I have an odd number, so I'm going to take 2 and 1, and I'm going to tie them together. Oops. So I'm going to take these 2 strings and tie them to this 1 string. And it is a little bit tricky at the end too, because I've got this little tail from my weaving. All right, I have completed the knots. Now, once you've done all of the knots, I would probably leave these little tails for now till we pull our cardboard loom off. Okay, this is potentially another tricky part. If you cut your own cardboard loom and your notches are close together, you are going to want to be careful when you pull this off, because your strings are going to want to hang into those notches. Most of the cardboard looms, if you got them from me, have wide notches, so it's going to be really easy to slide those out of the wide notches. So the next part is to pull your pouch off of your cardboard loom, and it kind of bunches up, but that's okay. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. And you can see my strings are still stuck in there because I had my notches so close together, but yours may be easier to pull off. So I am doing that. When I get to the taped one, you can just kind of pull that one off. If you can find something to tie that one to, you can, but it's not completely necessary. Okay, so I've got it off. It's a little ugly. So now all I have to do is flip my pouch inside out, pop my little corners through, and I have a lovely little pouch with a flap. So if you are bothered by these little strings, now is the time when you can trim them. Just make sure you don't trim your little knot off, because then your weaving won't be secure. And you can, of course, trim these on the inside too. If you want to add a button, you can add a button. If you want to add a strap, you can figure out how to add a strap, but those are not requirements to this project. You can trim any little pieces that are sticking out that are end pieces. And you are finished with your lovely little flap. Or I'm sorry, your lovely little pouch. So you can stick whatever you can fit in there, and that is yours to keep. Make sure you send me a photo of your awesome finished artwork. I am so excited to see them. Good luck. I will talk to you all soon. Enjoy your pouches. Bye, my friends.